What happens when a radio broadcaster gets let go from his sports talk job? Well, he tries to figure out what he wants to do next for a career, and in the meantime joins the 4 million other podcasts on the internet, and the Joncast is born. Join me each week as I talk to guests I find interesting or entertaining from the world of sports, play-by-play broadcasting, or whatever else sounds fascinating to me at the moment. The Joncast is what I'm doing until I figure out what I'm doing. Subscribe, download, and I hope you learn something along the way. All right, welcome in. It's the Big 50, episode number 50 of the Joncast podcast. When I started this, I had no idea I'd be doing 50 episodes. I just started a podcast because like the intro said, I just want to figure out what I'm, do something until I figure out what I'm doing. So welcome into the Joncast podcast. Thanks to my sponsors, Ian's Pizza in Madison. They've got 3 locations in Madison and 1 in Milwaukee as well. Go check out Ian's Pizza, and they're always changing over their slices. Try the mac and cheese. Also brought to you by me and Julio in Madison and in Fitchburg. And me and Julio, they've got the $4 margaritas Tuesdays and Thursdays, wine Wednesdays for just $5, and you're running out of time for their April specials. So go check out me and Julio, and we're planning a listener event at me and Julio. Stay tuned for details on that. When it happens, it's going to happen, and we're just going to go with it. So thanks to our sponsors, and you can always check out joncastpodcast.com, and please leave a review, drop in a rating on Apple, Spotify, wherever you consume your podcast. But I'm really excited for today's guest. She is an author of the book Giannis, The Improbable Rise of an NBA MVP. If you're a Bucks fan and you still haven't checked this out, what is wrong with you? My guest today is Mirin Fader. Thank you so much for joining the podcast.
Thank you for having me on, and congrats on 50. That's so cool.
Yeah, it's really cool. Here's to another 50, right? 50
yes.
more.
And many more.
I've really enjoyed the book on Giannis. It's
thank you.
Fantastic. And I love the stories. I'm actually, listening to the audiobook of it. So it's you reading the book, which I think is so cool. And whenever you talk, like you say a quote from Giannis, you do it in a way where I can imagine Giannis saying that. And so like now every time I hear these Giannis quotes, like imagine Giannis saying it, but you say it in such a perfect way that it seems like it's Giannis. Well, that makes sense at all, but
that means so much to me because the audiobook was a labor of love. And as you know, there are many Greek words and many Greek pronunciations, all of which I did not know. And so I just had to work so hard on it. So thank you for listening. Seriously, I learned so much. It's really acting. You have to, Giannis's humor, his charm, all of that has to come out. You can't just like read the script,
Yeah, exactly. And that's interesting you said, because you could, I heard obviously all these Greek names and words, and I'm thinking to myself, oh my gosh, how many takes did it take
a lot
to get that right? And
a lot.
We can start there because I actually had some questions on the process of the audiobook, because as I'm listening to it, I'm thinking to myself, what is the process like for an author to have to read their own book? And how long did it take you? Did you do it from home? Did you have to go in somewhere? What was that like?
Yeah, it was such a process. I think it took like 8-9 days, and I'm talking about every day for like 4 or 5 hours.
Sure.
I had no idea it was going to be intense. I went to a studio near me, and we just did it over and over. I had to get a Greek speech coach to help with the pronunciations, and you can't just get the name of the person right. You have to start over from the beginning of the sentence. So I would have the name fresh in my mind, and then I would start from the beginning of the sentence and then forget how to say the name in the middle of the sentence and then do it over and over and over and over. The Golden Dawn leader's name was particularly difficult for me. It might have taken like 7 times one time. But yeah, it's so interesting because I have become such an audiobook listener myself. And that was not a big part of my life, 5-10 years ago. And I've learned from feedback that readers appreciate when the author does their own audiobook because you understand the material, you understand the nuances, the funny moments, the charm, and you really have to get into character and almost act and be animated. So it really pulled me out of my comfort zone for sure.
Yeah, it was really cool. And I do appreciate when the author reads it as well, as opposed to like some guy in a deep voice.
Right, and it turns you off when you don't like the person,
Yeah, exactly.
I have quit on audiobooks because I'm like, oh my God, this person is so stale. So I was like, my only hope was like, please don't be stale. That's it. Please don't be stale. Be somebody that somebody wants to keep listening to.
Yeah. And you are, by the way. So take me through the process of how did you begin to write a book about Giannis? Why did you choose Giannis? I know you explained that a little bit at the beginning of the book.
Sure. Yeah. I've been wanting to write a book for a couple years now, and I never quite found the right topic. And I was trying to come up with something and then see if it worked. But a lot of the literary agents were like, I like your ideas. I just don't think they're sellable. With book writing, it's so strange. You have to have both a really good human idea, but something that's also very mainstream that, publishers will want to produce and people will want to buy. And so in 2019, in the summer, I went to Milwaukee to profile Giannis's youngest brother, Alex. And I really did not expect Giannis to be there. I just thought, well, I want to profile this kid. He's fourth in line. I wonder how much pressure it is to be him, what it's like to be him. And, then I go to the house and Giannis is there and it's just serendipity. And I'm just observing them together. And I'm like, wow, you cannot tell Alex, the brother's story without telling Giannis's story. And you can't really tell Giannis's story without the brothers because they mean everything to him. And so the more I observed and spent the day with them, I was like, this is a really family story. So when the profile came out, it was for Bleacher Report where I worked at the time. I really feel like that story showed as much about Giannis as it did Alex. And so I had been talking to a literary agent and I was like, what do you think about, doing a biography on Giannis? Because I just think there's so many more tender sides to him and loving sides to him that you saw in that piece than people would talk about. People really liked at the time, he hadn't won his first MVP. People just wanted to focus on the freakish athleticism. But that piece that I wrote really focused on the mental side of things. And so I just thought, what if we could turn that into a book? So excuse me. So that's what sort of led me to that direction.
Yeah. And when you start reading and hearing the story about Giannis, it's such an incredible story where he starts from where he is,
Right.
currently. And we don't know how the story of Giannis really finishes yet, but
Right.
because there could be even more championships and more MVPs on the horizon for him. But I don't know. Am I the only adult that gets inspired by Giannis? Do you get inspired? Like after doing this, did you just be like, oh my gosh, I got to change some things in my life, or I can be better at some things in my life?
Oh, 100%. I'm so inspired. You don't want to work on something where you're writing about somebody that you don't feel connected to in some way. The amount of people I interviewed, 221 people, most of them adults, and all of them are inspired by him. You just don't find people that don't have that same awe of him, and I think that's incredibly rare in today's game. 221 people, and not one person had something negative to say about him. I really was so inspired by that ego quote that he had in the playoffs about your pride and your ego and being humble. And there was one quote at the beginning of the book where I talked to the assistant coach on the Bucks, Josh Oppenheimer, and he said, I think it was something like Giannis goes so hard or whatever because he's so afraid of losing everything. That is so resonant to me in my career and my life. So I just think he's the perfect human story because all of us can take something from him, whether it's admiring your parents, being a good older brother, like working hard, not being satisfied. There's so much to be inspired by.
Yeah, he really truly is just an inspiring figure, and it comes through so well in the book. Something that I was really interested in learning about was, and when you got to it, was the racism that
Mhm.
Giannis endured in Greece. You talked about Golden Dawn at the start here, and the Golden Dawn party, and you know how much of that were you aware of before you started writing? Because the racism in that party in Greece, was just insane to learn about.
I know. I had never heard of Golden Dawn before this project. Obviously, I know that there's a ton of racism in Europe, and I sort of just accepted that and knew that loosely, especially in, places like France. And there's this hard move turn to the right in a lot of these countries. So I knew it existed, of course, but I didn't know that there was an actual neo-Nazi group patrolling streets and patrolling neighborhoods like, the one Giannis grew up in. And it was so important to do that context because I think Giannis's story has been really sanitized into this fairy tale of like, look at all these amazing white people that helped him. And then he got to ascend and he transformed everything and it was all good. And, the truth is much more mixed. There were amazing white people that supported him, and then there were also racist people that said horrible things to him. You kind of can't talk about one without the other. So I also thought it was important to talk about because people might not be aware, but just because you are born in Greece, as the son of immigrants does not mean you get automatic citizenship like in the US. So even though he was born there, he didn't have birthright citizenship. So it was really important to put the context of like why that is. How does it affect other Black players who are trying to climb this Greek system, to show that, Giannis, yes, he worked hard. He was amazing talent. He had physical gifts, but he really got very, very lucky. And so many people that look like him will never get those opportunities to advance.
Yeah, like I said, it was really interesting to learn about that part of Giannis's life. So, by the way, I do want to say one thing. You mentioned the humble quote. This is my shameless plug right now. You're giving me a second to bring this up. If you're watching on Spotify with us, if you go to joncastpodcast.com, Mirin,
Oh my God.
I made a t-shirt with the quote on it because I love the quote too.
I need this shirt. I need this shirt in my life. I'm going to get one.
Okay. We'll make it happen. But I just love the quote because here's such a young guy that just like he gets it at such a young age. And when I heard that quote, I was like, it just blew my mind that somebody that young could have that kind of perspective.
Yes. And it's so genuine. You can't fake being genuine. And I think what makes it interesting is it's not a person that pretends to be perfect. It's not a person that pretends to have known it, have success immediately. His story is really, it's a slow grind. You don't acquire that wisdom at age 21. You go through things and you go through things and you are left out of things and you have to grind to get in the inner circle. And all of his life experiences really just created somebody that I think is empathetic, compassionate, deeply thoughtful, smart, respectful, devoted. It's somebody like, for me, I'm always like, why is everyone not rushing to like join the Bucks? I would give if I was a basketball player, I want to play with that guy. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know why you don't see people rushing to Milwaukee. It's tremendous what he's built.
Yeah, it really is. And, you talk about his background and everything there that's, led him to become this type of person. I'm assuming that, the way he grew up led him, his work ethic and his focus, like to be focused on one singular thing 24/7 is so difficult to do. But would you say that focus, that drive, that determination that you talk about in the book, is that comes all from his background? Because if he had grown up in the States and was middle class or something like that, I mean, would Giannis be in the NBA, honestly?
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I think that there are certain things that you see that shape who you are. Like one anecdote in the book, his mom would be out selling trinkets for like 13 hours a day or something and still have the energy to wash the one pair of socks that the boys had so that they would have clean socks. You watch your mom do that and that does something to you, that she doesn't have to say work hard. You just look at that and you see that is what it takes to work hard. Compartmentalization, you brought up focus. He is great at compartmentalizing and being mentally tough because really that's what you had to do when his first meal would come at 11 p.m. You couldn't focus on how hungry you are or how, whatever you're feeling, you're just focused on taking your brothers to school and all getting on the same bus and going here. And you don't take things for granted because you know what it is to have so little. That's why I think it was so important to show that it's not like he came to the US and he got $1 million and it's all good. You don't like think one way for 18 years of your life, get money and completely forget about how you lived before. It was a very hard adjustment to learn to deal with abundance.
One part of the book I found really interesting was when he finally discovered he and his brothers about the NBA, and they started, going to these internet cafes and looking up all these different players. And to think of Giannis and the cornrows, like Allen Iverson, like I never knew that. That's funny. It didn't surprise me. I don't know if it surprised you that Kevin Durant, he kind of focused in on Kevin Durant, because if you look at young Giannis, and you compare them side by side with a picture of KD, there's very similar rather, just in the way their bodies are.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it made me feel old because I was like, "Oh my god, he's watching, like, our contemporaries at the coffee shop," like, I was like, "How old is this kid?" So, at first there was that, it's like, you're watching Blake Griffin, that's crazy. I remember when Blake got to the NBA. I personally I was less surprised about Durant, I was more surprised about Allen Iverson because that is, like, not what I pictured Giannis admiring, but, for him to be a taller, bigger player, I know he was super skinny then, but, he was not a point guard, and so I think it was fascinating to learn that, like, he loved AI and, um, yeah, it was really cool, and I love that it wasn't just the moves on the court, it was wanting to look like him. It was
Right.
wanting to emulate the braids, and I think that's really cool.
One of the friends of Giannis, and I believe, is it Rahan? Am I pronouncing his
Yeah.
name
Mhm.
correctly?
Yeah.
That friendship was a really interesting part again of the book. Have you ever followed up on some of these people? Like, what is he doing? What is his friend Rahan doing?
I think he lives in the UK now, not
Okay.
100% sure. I haven't followed up, but, he seemed to be doing well. I mean, I think that was honestly, that was one of the most challenging parts because you can't Google Giannis's childhood friends. Like, that this information, like, did not exist prior, and
Mm.
so it was having to do extensive vetting and finding the coaches and finding old rosters and having people introduce me to former teammates like this guy, and, um just sort of, having did you take photos together? And you see the photo of them in the book, but or actually, I don't know if it comes with the audiobook, but in the paper book, you see a photo of them 2 together as, like,
Oh,
thirteen-year-olds, and it's adorable. But I think that friendship was so important because a lot of people don't realize that both of them were in such white spaces, and that actually allowed a closeness to them, and I think that they learned so much about each other through this friendship, and I also think it just showed what a, like, fun friend Giannis was, like, that anecdote about, his friend who was also poor, they went to the church to get some food, but the friend is Muslim, and so Giannis pretended, "Oh, he's a good Christian boy, like, come give him some food," and Giannis is like, "You gotta trust me more," It was just really cute, you see those glimmers of that funny personality that we see now in him as an adult. He had that at age 13, 14, 15.
now you used the word adorable to describe him a little bit ago, and it's in the book too because he is very charming. He's the
Mhm,
humbleness, the smile. It
mhm.
really just ask any Bucks fan here over the last few years, they've fallen in love with Giannis because of his personality, because of that smile, because of him being so adorable. So I thought it was really funny when you write about how he had to practice being mean, like his mean mug, because he didn't want people to think he was this soft, adorable, cuddly little guy.
Exactly, that was one of my favorite, parts that I found in my reporting, and that's why we called the chapter "Mean" because it was a real focus, like, also he's battling, stereotypes about players coming from overseas that they're soft and they're this and they're that, and, they said, like, he had to practice it because he's not that guy. Like,
Yeah.
he's not like, "F you, blah, blah, blah," but now all these years later, you see him just rip the hearts out of people, and you're like, "Oh my god, like, this guy." I mean, so it's very fun to see the development of that, and that he took the scowl from Russell Westbrook, like,
Yeah.
again, I feel old, but, like, that's funny to me, like, he studied him. It's crazy.
And it is crazy. So he's got this adorable side to him. He tries to practice to show that he's tough and mean, and at the same time, he's a very emotional player as he's getting into the NBA and
Yeah.
everything. Where he would, there's many times throughout the book where you talk about how he'd lose his emotions. He's cry. He'd have to go settle himself down. And where do you think that comes from?
I mean, I think that was a really interesting part too, is that, boys and men in Greece are not socialized the way they are here in America. So showing emotion openly back in his old teams was not a weird thing. Like his coaches would often see him openly crying all the time. And so I think when he comes here, he doesn't understand that there's a code of masculinity and toughness that you have to have in the NBA. And he sort of has to learn that and learn to curtail that. But I think that it might not manifest in outwardly tears these days, but you still see that same like genuine empathetic person that has carried him through this whole time. But it really shows He really deeply cares. I think the word when I think of Giannis, I think thoughtful. That's the word that I think of when I think of him. Deeply thoughtful. And you don't always see that with players. Some guys they're just like content with making money and they don't really give a shit if they play more than 12 minutes a game, but he really like pours his heart out onto that court. And so that emotional thing I think is a superpower of his.
Yeah, and it's so cool to just to hear how, like you said, he doesn't care about money. He cares about getting better. Like
Mhm.
there's always something to work on. He said several times, like, I just want my whole all-around game. I want to work on everything. I want to be better. And that's a quality that, man, if you're whatever really industry profession you're into, if you can harness and hone in on that quality, man, that's something to have. And not everybody, not everybody can do it. It's just so difficult to do.
It is really hard to do, but it's miraculous when you look at the photos of him as a rookie and the photos of him now, the way his body has changed. I mean, that's why when people say like, "Oh, he doesn't really have skill, it's just natural athleticism." It's like, did you see his body circa 2013 to 14? That is work. He
Yeah.
was not born with this body. Yes, he was born with aspects of his body like the length and all of that, but he worked at it. He got better. He's never satisfied. These are all things that you cannot teach. You can't make somebody want it more. You can't make somebody try harder. And he has that drive in droves. And it goes back to that quote that we talked about at the beginning. Like his coach said, like a part of the reason why he's so driven is because he's afraid somebody's going to take it all away. So that motivates him.
Yeah, he came in skinny like Durant, and now he's at a point where he's like Karl Malone. He's just so buff. He's so big. It's
I
crazy the
know.
amount of work and dedication that something like that radical transformation takes. So, uh,
Right.
for you personally, how long have you been a writer, and did you always want to write?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I have been writing since the 5th grade, but
Okay.
I've been a professional writer since, God, nearly a decade now, so I just turned 31, so yeah, pretty much a decade. I I've always loved writing, it was my passion, but basketball was what I wanted to do. I wanted to be in the WNBA, so I never thought about writing as a career, and, I took basketball as far as it could go. I played my first year in college, and then I was like, "How do I stay involved with basketball?" And I thought if I become a sports writer, I could keep that love for writing and basketball and do it together. So, that's why I always wanted to do longer form stories and, books because I don't know, like, I just writing is my lab. That's my safe space, that's my place where I feel like most myself.
Yeah. So when you did start writing for the last 10 years, and you had been writing, but not a
Yeah,
writer
right,
since
exactly.
fifth grade, like what type of content would you write from fifth grade up until you got serious and decided I wanted to do the sports angle?
Yeah, it was just I have a million diaries. Writing was my way to cope with all the angst and everything going on in basketball because it was an uphill battle for me. I'm 5 feet tall and I was trying to play in a game of giants. And, I never felt seen for who I was and what I could do. And writing was my way of coping with all the difficulties I went through with basketball, whether it's the height thing or I had, debilitating injuries. And I needed to write. Like if I didn't write one day, I missed a day or something. I felt very lost. So it was something I needed to do to feel good, to feel okay. And so that's what I mean. I never considered it a career. I never thought, oh, I'm going to be a writer. Like I just never thought of that. Um, and then it turned into I got my first job at the Orange County Register, and I was there for 4.5 years, and I went to Bleacher Report and now The Ringer.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about your first job. What kind of stories were you writing there at the Orange County Register?
Yeah, I was doing all the shit work that nobody wanted to do.
Yeah.
I was fortunately doing features. I knew I wanted to do features, but it wasn't on anything like big time or whatever. I was doing like I said, the stuff nobody wanted to do, little league, high school, junior college. Um, I once had to do a story on 4-year-old baseball. So,
Oh,
um, but I loved covering Cal State Fullerton. That was one of my beats because it was a school of like really talented athletes. They just didn't get the funding that other big schools got. So it was like the perfect, ground for me to get better at writing. But, they had an Angels beat writer, the Lakers beat writer. It was a really competitive market trying to be a sports writer in LA, but I knew I didn't wanna be a beat writer. I didn't wanna write game stories. I wanted to do stories on who are these people and what makes them tick. So, Cal State Fullerton softball coach, doing a feature on her, like, that gave me so much life to do that, and the high school pitcher at the local school, like, what is he about? Like, I really honed my craft by doing these long form features on people that nobody's heard of.
hmm So you mentioned that you wanted to get into basketball. So did you have a favorite athlete growing up, and who was that?
Oh my gosh, it was a mix between Diana Taurasi and Sue Bird. Like, as you can see, I have curly hair, but I ruined so much of the curls by putting gel in my hair to slick it back to look like Sue Bird. I did not understand, like, how she did, and Diana too, she would slick it back and then put it in a bun, and, I wanted to be them so bad that I did that with my hair, and, yeah, I love them. I was a huge Kobe fan being from LA. Yeah, I just admired those 3.
Are you should or have you done any features on Sue Bird or Diana Taurasi? And is that something that you'd want to do in the future?
Yeah, I profiled Tarazi, like, God, maybe like 5, 6 years ago. But I actually tried to do it again before this season and just haven't really seen much movement in that request. So hopefully at some point before she retires, like, I am dying to do that feature.
Yeah, you'll get it, and it'll be awesome. It'll be awesome.
Thank
So
you.
for someone perhaps listening to this podcast now, and they're inspired by your book, maybe they're inspired by your story to become a writer, what type of advice would you give to somebody who's maybe just getting out of school right now and they want to pursue sports writing? Is there any advice you might give somebody like that?
I mean, fall in love with reading, like, you can see I love books. I mean,
Yeah.
my whole apartment is surrounded by books, and it's not sports writing. It's fiction. You learn so much about writing through reading, and whether that's character development, timing, all these things, like, you just become a better writer by reading. There's no chance that you can read and not get better at writing. There's just turns of phrases, things that you'll pick up that just will make you better. And I think the other thing is, just chase it wholeheartedly. I think coming out of school, I graduated in 2013. Like, people, I would reach out to veterans and they would say, like, the industry's horrible, don't get in it. And, just like super discouraging. And I've never understood that. Like, if somebody has a passion for something and wants to go for it, like, why not try? So I would just, like to give a counter message. Like, we could talk about the realities of the industry while also acknowledging that it's an awesome career and you should go into it if you want to. And I would also say, like, reach out to people that you admire that do things that you want to do. Like, I found my mentor on Twitter. I just DM'd him and I was like, I love the way you do this. Like, can I please talk with you? I want to write books someday. And now we're like super, super close. So,
No.
but there were so many people I reached out to that never responded to me. I was like 1 for 20. So just reach out to a million people and, like, hopefully that one person responds and can help and change things for you.
That's awesome. I love that. Yeah, you were 1 for 20, but it doesn't matter because you hit a home run with that, and
That's right.
you signed a contract extension. I don't know. I'm trying to make it all sports related
I
somehow.
mean, look, I applied to over 50, 60 places upon graduation, whether it was applying or reaching out cold, and I literally heard back from one, which was the Orange County Register. Like, I got no's from everyone else, or like a no response. So again, like, it might look from the outside like, "Oh, you went there, then there, then there," but it's like, yeah, well, 59 people said no, but one said yes. Like, you just have to find your one yes.
Yeah, it's kind of like you look at Giannis, you say he's an MVP, he's won a championship, but then you got to hear the whole story of how he actually
Yeah,
got to
so
where he
hard,
is. Yeah.
so hard.
So it's out in paperback now, right? Giannis, the Improbable Rise of an NBA MVP. That's paperback now.
It just came out in paperback, and there's a new epilogue. And by the way, I just recorded the audio version yesterday, so you'll get the updated epilogue via audiobook soon. But yeah, if you buy it in paperback, it has the new epilogue in there.
Oh, very cool. Well, I really do appreciate you taking some time to talk. The book, I'm telling you, Wisconsin fans, you don't even have to be like that hardcore of a Bucks fan. This story, I give it to your kids. Let your kids really, like, I'm trying to play the audiobook while my 9-year-old daughter is around me. Like, hey, listen to this. Like, you don't got so bad. Like,
Right.
you know, like
Right.
draw some inspiration from it. So I highly recommend it. It's fantastic. And I really appreciate you taking time, and thanks for writing the book.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. This was seriously so fun. And I just appreciate your thoughtful questions. And I'm so glad you liked it.
All right. Well, thank you. That's Mirin Fader, today's guest on the Joncast podcast, episode number 50. I can't believe episode 50 is here. Once again, Ian's Pizza. Where it is? Where is it? Right there. Ian's Pizza. Go check out Ian's Pizza in Madison with 3 locations. Me and Julio in Madison. They've got month of April specials, and we will be doing a listener party with a special guest. It'll be announced soon. It's going to be a really quick turnaround. Head out to me and Julio. We'll have a blast. We'll raise some money for charity. And also joncastpodcast.com if you want to check out some of my sports-themed t-shirts I have available in my partnership with Scotty in Madison. So thank you for listening. The Big 50 to episode number 50 of the Joncast podcast.